Hi guys, welcome back to Two PugsCast. Ray Roche and my cohort Jim Lavery. We've a special treat this time. We have the one and only Mr. Wayne Talbot. Introduce yourself there, Wayne.
I'm Wayne. I can be found in multiple sections of the internet doing multiple different things, but I'm mainly involved in Rogue Comics Ireland. I'm a writer, colorist, and one of the founders of the label, and we're one of the largest independent labels in Ireland. I also am one of the hosts of the Irish Pubcast, which is a long running podcast, and we do talk about all sorts of stuff, nerd stuff, and geek stuff. And we also have our own separate to that. We have our own D&D campaign, with Dungeons and Dragons campaign, called Sorcery and Shenanigans, where I am the DM for that. So I do multiple things. I wear many hats, but they all kind of stem from the world of nerd.
The word of nerd. Love the word of nerd.
Yeah, and the thing is, that's only part of what he does.
Mm.
That's a stripped down CV. No offense, it's a lot more than that, and has been doing so for many years. Wayne, for anyone that doesn't know him, and if you do comics in Ireland, especially Dublin, you've probably gone to Wayne and asked his advice or seen him at a convention. Because he's Mr. Comics. Now, I'm not blowing smoke. He is. Everybody knows Wayne. Now, we're thrilled to have you on tonight.
Thrilled to be here.
Yeah. Now these things, as we found out during the night, they can go on for hours, and so I prepared a few questions to try and make it professional.
Sure.
As a youngling, what brought you to comics?
So my introduction to the world of comics, this is kind of a common thing for people of my generation. So I was like grew up in the 80s. So my introduction to comics was 2000 AD and X-Men. That was where I found my in comics. My local Londis, so I lived in Cabra for my early stage of my life, which is on the north side of Dublin. And we had a Londis shop there that carried 2000 AD on a weekly basis, and then I had the reprints, the English reprints of all the X-Men books. So they used to, they still do them. You can still go into like the likes of Eason's and stuff and pick up these reprints of old X-Men books,
Yeah.
in kind of like double-sized issues where they have like part one and two of a story. Then you come back the following month and get the part two and four and three or three and four. And they were the things that kind of hooked me into the world of comics because I remember going down there with my pocket money every week and picking up
Yeah.
2000 AD, and then every month if it was there, I'd grab the copy of the X-Men UK reprint, and then it kind of rippled effect out from there because then as I got older, then I discovered Forbidden Planet when it used to be up on Dawson Street.
Right.
That was kind of like when I found that place, it was like,
It's
oh
Mecca. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like wow, there's more to this, and then it kind of snowballed from there. Yeah, it started to be where I started. I think as young as the age of probably 11 or 12. Because what happened was I was in Scouts, and there was a guy
Oh.
called Mark Colgan in Scouts with me, and he was a bit older than me, and he loaned me all of his X-Men comics. So it was the Uncanny X-Men, a lot of the Jim Lee run back from the 90s, all that early stuff. And I mean, everyone of my generation distinctly remembers that gatefold Jim Lee cover
Right.
of them all facing off against Magneto. Like it's synonymous with X-Men now. And I just remember just seeing that in the very first printing of that because Mark had it, and that's kind of where it went from there.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. It's a generational thing. We've had slightly older people on so far, and they all started with the Beano, the Dandy, and we eventually found like X-Men and people like this later on in life.
Yeah,
So we're saying how lucky kids are today that it's at their fingertips, and so many great stories out there that we think are classics now, and they haven't read them yet. It's all
yeah,
ahead of them. It's fantastic, like.
it is, and I think there is a certain amount of look for a generation now because it's back when I was started to read comics, they weren't the thing, they weren't the coolest thing in the world. I distinctly remember being in school, in secondary school, and I remember a fella slagging me off for reading comics. And my retort was, aside from you just not being able to read, but which got a couple of guffaws from fellow classmates, and he shut up pretty quickly. But it was a thing where people were like, "You read that stuff?" Like particularly 2000 AD, because 2000 AD was like the sci-fi anthology book with all manner of wackiness, and then of course Judge Dredd. But I distinctly one of my favorite things as a kid was we went on a school trip to Rainbow Rapids, out on the coast in Dublin. I don't think it's not there anymore, but it's the essential. It's like the earliest version
I'm getting a
of
mental image though.
of Aqua World. So it was just this one
Yeah.
big. It was just one big water slide,
Right.
and that's what it was. It was Rainbow Rapids, and we used to go out there as kids, in on school trips, and that's what they'd load you up into the bus. It's like in The Simpsons when they go to the box factory.
Yeah, yeah.
You'd either go to the local industrial estate down in Finglas, or you'd go to Rainbow Rapids. And it was summer. It was just coming up to summer, so we went to Rainbow Rapids, and we stopped off on the way. It was out towards kind of the coast, heading out towards Dún Laoghaire, Bray, kind of that direction. And we stopped at this corner shop, and I went in to get some stuff, and they had this beautiful double issue, or else a special edition of Sláine from 2008. Um, and I was besotted with this particular printing because it cost me like I had a small bit of pocket money to bring with me on this trip, and and it was a lot of it to buy chocolate or whatever, and I spent all of it on this comic. And I was distinctly remember the story in it was when Sláine faced off against Diamond Skull Dragons, and there's a whole thing where there's all these maidens been used as bait for these dragons to come in so people could decapitate them and take their diamond skulls and sell them and keep them as treasure, so on and so forth. But I was mesmerized by this on this trip to and from Rainbow Rapids. I didn't give a shit about the water slides. I wanted to read this comic. That's all I wanted to do. So yeah, I think nowadays kids or adults or teenagers, anyone wanting to get into comics, they've got such a huge kind of array of things. It can be overwhelming. Yeah. And you do get asked a lot, particularly at conventions, what's the best comic for kids to get into? Or if I want to start reading comics, what do I start with? And particularly if you're selling your own work, and Ray, you can attest to this. Like if somebody comes to your table at the convention who's like, I'm only getting into comics, what's something I should get into, or what will I start to read? That you have that I could pick up now that would get me going, and it depends on the person's personal choice, really.
Fine. We have a range of comics, and there's something for everyone, we say, but not really. We just hit the big genres. But people do come up and they say, "What are you into?" And they say, "Oh, everything," and they're not really. But you give them one, let them have a look at it, and then you talk to them, and then you find out what they read with their kids, and they pick something up. It's a wonderful feeling to say I gave someone a brand new idea, a brand new story to read. It wasn't like issue 575 of Superman, where we kind of know what's going to happen in it. The indie books, because we're not under constraints, we can write a story that we like. We can throw a curveball in. We don't have to follow too much. We have to follow certain formulas, but you can trick people. You can entertain them in a different way. And we had a few people come back to us and say, I enjoyed that. What else have you got? And that's what it's about,
No, like that's, as an independent creator and as an independent comic book creator, that's what you want. You want to be able to hook somebody and say, well, look, you really enjoyed that book. And we're lucky in Rogue because Rogue Comics has got such a diverse collection of creators involved on the label. We cover a lot of bases for a lot of different things, a lot of different demographics. We have like Colin Griffin's Ocean City series is probably it's probably easily right now our most popular run of any book that we have. Now, a couple of titles are catching up with it, but since its inception and since its first launch, it's sold out of so many print runs because it caters to kids to a degree, but it's also the stuff in there for adults as well. And it is a cracking book, but then we tend to lean also a lot heavier to the adult side of things with stories that we have, like my own books by proxy, and that's for Adu, are very much I write for adults. I've never written a kid's story. It's either espionage or twists and turns, or it's horror. And they're kind of my two wheelhouses that I would live in. But then we have the likes of new books that we have by proxy, which is like we have these little things, and Ray, I don't know if you do this, but we have little elevator pitches that kind of hook into kind of current or well-known, maybe even pop culture references. Like, so if I was to try and sell by proxy, it's John Wick meets MacGyver.
Yeah.
So that gives people a mental picture of what they're buying. And and same with Nats Ferrari, it's Lost Boys meets Band of Brothers. So
Yeah.
people know what they're kind of signing up for when they buy this book. And we've gotten people say, oh, I don't like that type of stuff, that's not for me.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, you don't like that, we have this. And we have we have a new title as well called Unretired. And that's the tagline on that one is, or the byline on that one is, it's Rick and Morty meets Dirty Harry. So there's something there for a lot of different people.
Yeah.
And we have there's also we like out there stories too. Like Derek O'Leary is a really good writer, and we're lucky to have 2 books from him on our label. One called Cancer, which is a really interesting take on somebody having to deal with terminal illness. And then there's another one, a new one called Control Alt D Elite, and it's a whimsical look at the end of the world. And it's kind of like it takes the world that we live in and just he turns them on their heads, and people have come back and says that was really interesting. I haven't read anything like that before, and that's what you want. That's really what you want. You want somebody to come back to you and say that was unique, and I haven't read anything like that before, and it's really cool and it was very well put together. And of course, the art helps. Like we have really good artists on our label as well. So I mean, like Colin is a phenomenal artist. Danny Earls with his book Hellfire, which is a huge seller. Because it's based on Irish folklore. So people are like, oh, gives a bit of that, because that'll always hook someone. When someone tells you, oh, it's based on an Irish myth, that's an instant, yeah, I'll have that, thanks.
Yeah. So after being a fan for so long, your whole life nearly, what made you decide to have a go yourself, do your first book?
So I've been writing for years. I've been writing for myself because of Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop RPG stuff that I run. You write for that as well. And I've always had friends of mine tell me, why don't you publish stuff?
Yeah.
I was like, I'll give it a go, maybe eventually down the line. And I remember distinctly, it was out, we were at the launch of Half Past Danger, the first one, and I was talking to Stephen Mooney about a few different things. And he says, you can write, so why don't you do something? I was like, I've been toying with it. And then after meeting Gillian and Kev and seeing what they can do, and kind of, I had an idea for The Broker, and then Lightning Strike Comics came along, and it was a case of they wanted to publish the story. So they took the first part and they published the first part after I put it together and got Rory Coleman. We very luckily got Rory Coleman. And then Timothy C. Brown was a colorist as well. So it kind of all just started to fall into place real quickly once I decided I'm going to give this a whirl. And when I started to hand around the script to people, they were like, wow, it was like, wow, this is actually good. This is what, okay. So it kind of went from there. And then we kind of decided, you know what, The Broker needs to be its own thing. Like Lightning Strike was, at the time, Lightning Strike Comics was taking too long to publish books. Because of just the way, in the nature of books, putting books out there is tough, and particularly for an independent label. So I kind of I had the story, and I was like, I really want to put this out there. So that's when Rogue Comics was founded off the back of that. So The Broker was the first book launched on Rogue Comics, the full complete version of it. And I very luckily got Brian Corcoran to finish it off with, because Rory had then been picked up by I think he was doing some work for Marvel at that stage, for IDW. And he was like his star was on the rise.
Yeah.
You
have to catch them while they're young, you see. Once they get famous,
yeah. Well, I mean, it depends on how invested these, if and the thing about it is as well, you always just remember this, is when it comes to independent books, you do have to pay your creative team. You'd be lucky to grab a creative team that's willing to work pro bono for the time, and then at the end of it come in and say, right, well, we'll see what happens at the end and if there's any going to be payment. But if you want to be serious about it, you have to be able to pay your creative team. So I made a decision that if I was going to finish The Broker, I was going to find an artist that was going to find a letterer, I was going to pay them, and that was how it was going to get made. So that's how The Broker ended up getting made. That was like, I found Brian Corcoran, I met him at Talbot one year. And he was entering the 2000 AD Star Search, and he got through to a certain level of stages, and he showed me his portfolio. I was like, look, man, I've got this script, and I showed him the script, and he's like, yeah, I want to do it. And we worked out between ourselves, like, rates and stuff. And then Marina Buin came on, and she continued the lettering from the first part, and we just stitched the book together, and we were lucky that it all just came together really well. So yeah, so like I think I got the itch, and even though I
Yeah, it's
scratched
not
it
funny.
slightly, you do get
It's an
the itch.
addiction. It is an
Even though you
addiction.
scratch it slightly, that you
Yeah.
get one book out there. I was already working on two more books, and I was like, I think I'm going to keep going with this. So that's when we were like, well, if we're going to keep going with this as a collective, let's put together a label that we can do this ourselves and look to put together something that can help other people do it as well. So that was kind of the foundations of what Rogue became.
Brilliant.
Okay.
What's something surprising you've learned making comics?
It takes a long time.
Yes, yeah. People are always surprised. When's the
Yeah,
next one out? It's going to
yeah.
take a year.
It takes
What?
a long time. I mean, so the I started writing. I started writing
Sorry.
it's all right. I started writing the broker, and then with the idea that this was going to come out pretty periodically, and then realized it wasn't, and I got impatient and I was like, I need to do something about this. But then what I learned from that was like it all depends on the pace of you as the writer, your artist, to be able to produce pages. But at the indie level, we're very lucky that while we may set ourselves deadlines because we're self-publishing, we don't answer to a higher power to say you have to have this out at a certain date. So we are lucky in that regard that we can take our time and eventually publish the book when it eventually is ready to go. I'm sure if any of us were to jump to any of the bigger labels and be set with deadlines, there would be an adjustment involved. And I'm sure you'd be working with teams that would be well capable of working within those adjustments as well. But yeah, I think that's one thing I learned is that it does take time to put a book together, and a lot of and time and money as well.
Yes, yeah. And the old saying that time is money. That's very true. I have to say, Jim there, he carries the heavy load. I write, I do everything else. I letter, I publish, I edit, blah blah. Well, my daughter edits now, but Jim, by sheer time spent on the book, Jim carried the can with that because you know yourself how long it takes. And it's not just sitting down and getting a general idea of a story or a page and just scribbling what you want. You have to adhere to certain parts of the script. Things have to be on the page. Things have to land in a certain way. Um, it's all time, and he does marvelous work. In the time we have. And I try to feed him as many things as I can, but
Yeah.
it's just a labor intensive business. People don't realize how many steps are involved either.
No,
Yeah.
they don't.
Even lettering, some of the things, letter act, just at the last minute before you send to the press, letter everything. No, that's a way to the madhouse.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's so much time. It's so much money. We do it because we love it, not because we want to get rich. But it's an addiction of a sort. But it's not a bad addiction though. You learn so much.
It's a passion, right?
It's a passion. I shouldn't say
Addiction wouldn't be the
I
word
shouldn't
I
say
would.
addiction.
Passion would be
Passion,
the
yes.
word I would use.
It's a
I mean,
compulsive passion. Yes.
it is. There's definitely a compulsive nature to it. If you want to keep at it, like I mean, like Jim, I don't know how you feel about like doing the art side of things, but there's a reward at the end of it, even creatively. Like I mean, putting a book together and just having a finished product in your hand that you've put together. And I do draw as well. I'm an artist, but I don't do comic book work. But I mean, even just as an artist, it must be rewarding to have that finished product in your hand.
Well, I was looking at your Instagram page just before we came on. It's some amazing. So anybody watching this video, please go and check out Wayne's Instagram pages as well, because the paintings on there are phenomenal, really phenomenal paintings as well. And
Thank you.
you said, Wayne, you've got a load of different hats on it. I think there's this compulsion, but to see something, and I said this a lot to Ray, you've got this idea in your brain, and then, all this time and weeks and pass and everything. And then finally, here it is in your hand. It's a real thing, tangible in the world. And it is satisfying. It's hugely, hugely satisfying. But I'm sure you would agree with me, probably, comic books are my favorite medium of entertainment. So I'm sure you would agree with me, if not your absolute favorite, maybe one of your favorites. But so I wanted to ask you, what is it that comics can do that the other medium can't. For me, I'll just tell you, for me, is that the fact that so if you're watching a movie, or you're listening to music, or even if you're playing a video game, it's not got this exactly same tactile thing. There's the smell of print.
Sure.
There's the thing. I still have you mentioned the 90s X-Men. I followed a run of 90s X-Men of Joe Madureira for the artwork back in the day, and I could smell the newsprint, and I fell in love with the book, and that's what I think book comics can do that other forms of entertainment can't do. That you can't love a video file on a CD or something.
It's like what Stan Lee's famous quote is, like, looking at porn is great, but the feel of a boob in your hand, it's the tactile thing. And it's the same thing applies to comics.
Yeah.
He says digital comics, they're great and all, but it's the feel of a book in your hand. You're right. I do love comics, and I think they are a fantastic medium to tell stories through, because there are zero limitations. And there's none. It's literally the imagination of the writer, the artist, the whole team, the editor, everything, the letterer. Like comics, I think the beautiful thing about comics nowadays, and the production of comics nowadays, compared to back in the day when it was done in a certain way, now with the encapsulation of all the digital media, the way comics are put together, like different facets of comic book creativity have become elevated. So when color started to become digital, when people started to color comics digitally, like an actual colorist became just on the same level of storytelling ability or recognition, not ability. They always had the ability, but it was the recognition of a colorist driving a story the same way an artist would drive it. Whereas if you look at the old X-Men comics, as phenomenal as they were, as the storytelling was, there's only a couple of artists, I would think, where the colors would play just as big a kind of part in telling the story as the line work would have. Like, obviously the biggest one jumping to my mind was Jack Kirby with all the Eternal stuff and the gods and the way those pages looked, the Kirby crackle and those big booming colors. But now you have books that are elevated through storytelling because of the way the color is used in the storytelling. And I do coloring in my books, so I color my books. And I've learned a lot over the years. Like, if you look back, I look back on The Broker and it's as rough as anything. I'm like, ugh. But I was learning. It was my first book. I'd never done it before. And I was learning. And by the end of that book, I'd learned a lot. Then at Nosferatu, as I went to the Nosferatu, and Kev Keane took me and he was like, come here, let me show you some stuff. And Kev Keane was like guiding me as a colorist. Because that dude is like, he is a star. Shadow. I'm very lucky to have him as a friend and as a colleague and as a fellow creator. Because he has like nurtured parts of my ability to push me to certain directions. And just as much as us working together and me giving him scripts and him putting together pages, has kind of like, he has worked on books that we've worked on together. And he's like, this is like, in Nosferatu, he said to me that book in his mind was like a launch pad to where he is on his ability now, which is top tier. Like, he's working for Todd McFarlane, for Christ's sakes. You know, so yeah, I think even lettering, like, there's letterers now that are getting a name for themselves through their ability to guide a book, because lettering is hugely important to telling a story in a comic book. If you letter badly, the story doesn't flow as well. The layouts of the speech bubbles, the direction of the line through the page, of the way you read it, that is huge. And that's something I learned as well. I lettered a book, a Tales from Eternal Worlds, for Art Sushi and Roche. And I lettered that book, and I cut my teeth on that book when it comes to lettering. And you do learn a lot about storytelling within comics as well through lettering. So there's so many facets of comic books that people don't realize is instrumental to how a good book is. And like, it's when you start to appreciate all those different levels of creativity in a team, and you see that it's a team putting it together, not just one big name writer and one big name artist. It's like, even like I remember having this conversation with somebody about how we credit everyone on Rogue, where our editors get just as big a billing as the artist and the writer, and the letterer would get a billing as well. Because like, Gillian Dempsey is our editor on all of our books, across the board. Gillian Dempsey is our editor, and she is phenomenal. And I think she should be working for a big label, but I don't want her to leave Rogue. But she should be, because she is absolutely fantastic. and she makes our books better with her abilities as an editor. And she suggests things, even at a writing level and a kind of a pacing level. And it's that key thing of that in Rogue, we're integral to each other's books and we guide each other's books along. So we're very lucky in that regard that we have a very, very good creative force on our label. So yeah, no, it's a long answer to your question. I love comics.
Yeah. It comes across really clearly, and it's just, I was on our last podcast, I had mentioned that, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I was teaching a workshop, comic book workshop, and I sometimes do school visits and different things. Whenever you tell kids, you know, to break it down, it takes about, and explain, it takes about 6 people to create a comic, working on a comic, and I explain to them and say that there's actually a career where you get to color in all day. Their heads almost pop off. The top of it pop off, like you see, like they pay money and you get to color in all.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal realization. But then again, I'm just trying to hook them in. Maybe addiction is the right word. I'm just trying to get that wee addiction, because we were talking, another common thing you were saying is the newsagent stand was the common denominator, right? Wouldn't you say that a lot of people who've come on and we chatted to, the common denominator, they got a bit of pocket money, they go down to the news agent for sweets or whatever, and they pick up whatever. Yeah, well, phenomenal. And also I've been hearing about the collapse and the death of comic books since I was 16. I've been hearing it's just ongoing, that it's about to collapse any day now. It's like up and down.
Like it did have, like there was that fall in the 90s when it was just, everything just got too bombastic. And I don't think we've gotten to the stage now in the industry where it's going to die at any point. There'll be ebbs and flows and different facets of creativity and different facets of parts of comics where people will go to get their fix. Anyone that wants their superhero books, they can go to Marvel, DC, and, you know, for the superhero books, for the big names, like, you know, you get your Holy Trinity with Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. You have your Marvel stories with all of the, you know, X-Men, Avengers, the works, like, you know. I think it's to talk about, like, you're saying about the newsstand. We didn't have major comic book stores in Dublin when I was growing up. I found them eventually, but it was where the newsstand started. We had Forbidden Planet and we had The Alchemist's Head, which The Alchemist's Head was where you would go to find books that came out 6 months previous because they just got them in. Like The Alchemist's Head was like the older, dustier comic book store. And in all honesty, myself and my buddies went there just to get their bags that they had, because they had this amazing logo, this green logo with white writing on it and great font. And it was just this old alchemist's face with long, scraggly hair. And we used to just bag all of our books in those bags. So we just go in and buy 1 or 2 books in their cheapo section to get their bags, and then bag everything we bought in Forbidden Planet. But we're spoiled for choice now. And we've got great stores in the city centre. Dublin City Comics is my go-to shop, but you have the Big Bang out in Dundrum as well. And Forbidden Planet's there as well. They're now on the quays. Like, you know, you'll find the comics once you get past all the Funko Pops, but they're in there. It's just, like, yeah, there's no escaping comics. They're not going anywhere. Continue, like, they may not be raking in the big books that the movies and the TV shows that are offshoots of them are doing, but kids will find them and adults will continue to find them, and they will, like, when you have shows that are called comic cons, the word is not going to go anywhere. People are going to be talking about comics forever. So
yeah, it's odd that you have those Marvel and DC, and by the way, I had no idea that was a thing. People go, like, I always assumed Batman and the Hulk were, like, you know, they were in the same universe. I didn't know, but people would ask you later on, "Oh, are you a Marvel or DC?" I go, "What are you talking about?" I just know, because I was reading, as you said, the Beano 2000 AD, even, and we've talked about it before as well. Misty, the kind of horror anthology comic, and all of this. So just anything, I would read anything coming up. But the last thing anybody could do where I lived in Belfast was be into comics. It was the last. There wasn't a dedicated shop. So the idea that, and I sort of vaguely aware, I first superhero comics I ever collected was the Secret Wars run in 1984, whatever that was. So, and that was a Marvel UK reprint. So it was again at the sweet shop, and I didn't know who's the X-Men, who's that. So the idea of saying, a run of comics, so I could get in. People often talk, or you see, different podcasts and stuff. People talk about the, I don't know, the Phoenix Saga.
Yeah.
Like that was they followed it each month. Like I don't know, I didn't know that. Was no possibility except going back and buying back issues. That was the only way to do it. You just said something there that was really interesting. Those DC and Marvel used to do horror comics and westerns and young romance comics and all of those things, and now we have to go to small press and indie publishers to find those kinds of stories, which is really peculiar to me because there's clearly a market for it.
I mean, I'm still, there are still some stories in there. Like, I mean, then they do horror. Like, I mean, they have their labels that do that type of stuff. Vertigo for DC, like, I mean, is responsible for Sandman, and like they've got like the Constantine stories. There's a lot of stuff in there that's horror based. Like, there are particular genres. Like, it's probably not like full on gore horror, and there are other books. Like, the Image has got so many books that are in so many different genres that you could find something in there that you would consider to be horror or to consider to be romance books as well. Sci-fi. It's a wide spectrum. Saga would be the one that if somebody says I want a romance book but I want a bit of sci-fi, there you go. There's a lot of stuff in there. Even stuff like Western. Is it the name of the cowboy book that was East of West, I think it's called, or East of,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
By Image, that came out a couple of years ago. That's a great sci-fi. Again, it's got sci-fi twist to it, but it's a Western. So like there is a plethora of different ways of you'll find something. Like, even like the labels are, while they may not be the mainstay, and they'll always rely on their annual event books, there'll be something somewhere that'll have that. The Black Label in DC doing more adult themed books, and then Marvel is great for hitting certain demographics that may be seen as a minority, or bringing stuff from a minority into the mainstream. Like, they all do Pride books as well, which is great to see. Like, and you'd kind of hope that would kind of soak out into mainstream as well, where you see those characters kind of breathing out into wider stories. So like, it's the beautiful thing about it is that like, you have a lot of people criticizing DC and Marvel, and I have in the past myself, for what they do, but at the end of the day, they're going to go with the popular stuff. They're not going to go with the niche stuff as often. But when they go with the niche stuff, they do get criticized for it as well. Like, Batman the Damned by Brian Azzarello got panned a lot by a lot of certain sections of the internet for certain content within it. But once he got past that bit of it, the book is actually okay. It's a good book, and it's got an interesting take on Batman. It's a different take on Batman. And there is an element of not so much horror, but psychological kind of trauma in there, which kind of comes part and parcel with the Batman character. So yeah, and to speak to the indie side of things, you'll definitely find more out there books, and ones that probably explore topics that you wouldn't generally see in the mainstream titles.
But we always say that that's a privilege we have.
Yeah.
And we talk about stuff. We write a book about something, and let's say it's a Western, but it's actually about something else. It's a common thing to put yourself into a book, and something that's just happened to you is the driving force, because it takes so long to write, produce a book, comic book. You have to have that passion to keep you going. It has to mean something for you. Our latest one we're working on now, Wolf, and it's a werewolf story set in Galway, and it came about because of something happened to me, and personal thing, but it was the spark that drove me to write this story, and it's kept us going now. and we're a third of the way into the color pages, and we're doing color for the first time, which is amazing. And we went backwards and forwards on color, what color means in a page. Every location has a color scheme, you know, and it's a lot more technical compared to other books, really.
Yeah.
And Jim's been a topper, you know, he's tried, that didn't work, we try something else. And it's difficult to tell someone what you want. You know in your head what you want, but it's not till they get to a certain point and they go, oh yeah, I get it now. And I don't have to do much hard work anymore. I know the last 6 pages, we just batches of 6 in time and sends them to me, right? The last 6 pages are just, you know, I don't have to do anything. I look at them, Haley proofs them and goes, yeah, that's fine. And it's just amazing.
Yeah.
But it took us a while to get there. Well, it was so worth it. I mean, and Jim, like we talk about upskilling all the time here. My storytelling's getting better. Jim's artwork, he's making different marks and stuff like that. That passion we were talking about before, and a personal thing that, you know, I just took that and made it slightly different. But we call that a privilege. You know, we produce our own books. I pay for everything. We have that privilege that we can tell that story our way. Like you were saying earlier, if you had to satisfy a Marvel editor, you know, you'd be under the thumb, not just for time, but things you couldn't say, you couldn't do, you know.
Well, I mean, the thing about that is that not to disparage anyone wanting to work for any big label. That's always the end goal. That's always the end goal. If somebody's turning around to me tomorrow and says, "Look, we'd like you to write for this character for such and such a label," I'd be like, "Yeah, I'll give it a go. Happy to do it. It's the difference to what I meant earlier on was it's a case of you have to adjust your own expectations of what it was going to be, because you're working with established characters. You're working for a big company that expects results within a period of time.
It comes with baggage.
Well, you have to be able to do those things. If you aren't able to do those things, then working in that scenario is not for you. You know, go back to doing something in your own pace. That's great. And some people can only work that way, where you're not under pressure. But if you can and you're able to do it, that's what those labels are looking for. Somebody they can rely on to deliver, and to deliver well, and to deliver quickly under tight constraints. And
I imagine it must be difficult if you have this burning urge. You've got a character you've created, and you want to jump on it and spend 50 hours drawing this guy, you know. But you have to draw somebody else's character, you know, with, you know, it must be a weird mindset, you know. Like there are jobs people go to work and say, I just want a paycheck at the end of the week.
Yeah.
Then there are people who go to work and they're firemen, they're doctors, they're police officers, and they believe in their job and they make a difference. It must be difficult to have that burning creative part inside you and know I can do better than what I'm doing now for 50 hours a week working for a label. But at least I'm drawing the Hulk, or I'm drawing Captain America.
Sure.
You know? So it must be like a shift in thinking, you know. I love what I'm doing, but I want to create for myself.
I mean, I think the frame of mind you have to have there is if the end game for you is to be your own creator and do your own stuff, then great. But if you want to be seen on a world stage and have yourself up there at the level of all these other creators that are up there and work their way up through the ranks on characters that they may not have the biggest interest in, but you have to prove yourself and show that you can tell the stories, be you a writer or an artist or a colorist or whatever, you're not gonna, if it's a rarity that you land straight in and somebody goes, here, you're drawing Spider-Man, good luck to you, you know, or you're writing Spider-Man, have at it. You do have to show an editor that you can do the job. And then once they're happy to see that you're doing the job and able to deliver, that's when they're like, right, well, this guy can deliver, or, you know, give them something a bit more juicy, or put them on a book that's going to be a more wider audience and boost them up a bit. It's a wacky thing. Irish creators in the likes of Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse, Vault Comics, Valiant Comics, they're all like Top Cow, all the IDW, all those labels. And the Irish have a reputation of being able to deliver on time, well, to the spec that they're given. Because if they, you know, like you can look at the amount of Irish writers and artists that are out there now working on books that have a really good spotlight on them. and the numbers continue to grow. It's all down to the ability to be able to deliver on time and to deliver good stuff, and the willingness to do the work. If you don't have the willingness to do the work, you're not going to last very long. If you're just in it with the end goal of, I'm just going to do this for a couple of years and then go off and make my own book and make it big with that book, yes, have that pipe dream, but you're going to have to prove yourself to a lot of people before you can get there, you know? So.
Yeah, the pipe dream goes, it's probably tantalizing for people to be doing something like, I have a day job and my hobby is comics, making comics. So what I do during the day, I sometimes use what I learn, in certain ways, but I'm not making comics during the day. But if you were drawing comics, the point I'm making is that you're using all those skills, right? And you could be spending that time. It must be tantalizing to think that, I could spend this time on my own thing, simply because it's the same thing. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, you talk to anyone, you hear it on podcasts all the time. The same Irish names I mentioned all the time, that they went to America or England and they delivered, on time, every time, best they could, at the right price, and the standard never dropped. The day they left, the standard was always the same.
Yeah.
And that meant that people gave other Irish people a chance, And once an Irish person gets a foot in the door in any industry, they say, I've met my friend Billy, and Billy gets a job. That's just a brilliant way. It's not nepotism, it's just give Billy a chance.
I will say that anyone that's put anyone forward, I think, within any industry, if the individual didn't have the talent to be able to do the work, they wouldn't have been put forward.
That's
They definitely, like anyone that's out there now working in comics, in television, in media.
It's not an easy ride,
It's not. And I think also we have this thing at Rogue, is that we let the work speak for itself. We let the books speak for themselves. So if anyone comes to us and says, would you not be like to be doing this? We're like, how do you feel? It's like, well, look, there's the work. This is what we do. This is what we can do. This is the timeline we can deliver stuff in. If you like what we do and you like what's out there from us, then, we can have a conversation. But we just we don't stand and orate about how great we are. We just say, look, here's a book. If you think it's good, great. And I think like Kev got to spawn through hard work and perseverance. And like he deserves every second of it because he is a fantastic artist. Anyone else that's on our label that gets a break, they deserve every part of it because they put the work in. And I think essentially that's the bottom line, that if you're going to kind of, when people see you putting the work in, they're going to go, right, well, let's give this person a chance. And I don't think anyone that's Irish that's in comics at the moment is going to boost anyone else unless they can put the work in and do it. So
because it's your own reputation as well you're putting on the line.
Sure. Yeah.
You say, take Joe, he's grand, but Joe isn't. No one's going to ask your opinion again. Because you left him stuck the last time. You gave him this guy. He's got one leg. He can't stand up for himself.
Yeah.
It's. I'm not trivializing anyone's talent or anything like that, but it's to get an opportunity in. Irish people obviously did. Like English people, 2000 AD, they recommended people, but they knew they were good. They'd worked.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a question, put my cousin in there. That's not what I'm saying. As a nation, we're hard workers,
Sure.
And other nations around the world, they're hard workers too, and we are a creative people, we have oral tradition, we have music, we didn't just grow potatoes, and we're not all hard drinkers, it's not all diddly eye. Irish people have gone around the world and they've given us a good reputation in a lot of countries, when you're abroad and you mention you're Irish, you get a great welcome,
Sure, yeah, you do. Yeah.
Anyway, one question I want to ask you, and they call it different names, writer's block, fear the blank page. Do you ever get that?
Yeah. Everyone gets that. Anyone that writes, if they tell you they don't, they're lying. So the book I'm working on at the moment, A Town Called Kill, I started writing that after The Broker. I only finished the full script of its first book, which is a chunky tome, it's a big book. but it took me. I went back and forth with it over and over the years. I'd written Nosferatu in between that. I went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth because parts of it I just kept feeling like it was falling over or wasn't sitting right. And I got block on that book in particular because it's a big project, and it is my passion project. It is the big book I want to do. So I got a lot of writer's block on that particular title. But the final product I'm extremely happy with. I find to get rid of writer's block, you just need to step away. Just step away from the desk. Go do something else. Go read a book, watch a TV show, play a video game, read a comic, go for a walk, do something else but write, and let it come to you. I get a lot of my ideas when I'm walking or else when I'm on a train. Now, I haven't been on a train in 2.5 years, but I've done a lot of walking. And that's where like I put my headphones on, put on some music, and I just zone out, and the thoughts eventually start moving. If you concentrate, I know, well, if me personally, if I concentrate too hard and try and force the words, they're never gonna come. Never. And it is cliched when somebody, like when you say that, go do something else. But that's what happens, because if you're a writer, you're always thinking about what you're doing, or you're pulling things from your own experience. Like you said, for Wolf, you've pulled something from your own experience. You do pull stuff from your own experience and you put yourself into the stories. But if you're not, I firmly believe that you have to consume to create.
Yeah.
So if you're not consuming stuff, as in you're not reading, you're not watching movies, TV shows, playing video games, reading comics, experiencing life, you're not going to be able to write at all. Even if you're not drawing from your own life, that type of stuff oils the wheels, and you need to have it. If you don't have it, you are going to have serious problems. So I did. I had writer's block on that particular story for a good year and a half. Now, a lot of it was probably 2 years. It was down to the stress of everything everyone went through over the last 2 to 3 years. But I knuckled down, and I started to kind of get my head into a better space, and read a few things that might be adjacent to what I was trying to write. Watched a couple of movies that might be adjacent to what I was trying to write. And eventually the words started to come back. So yeah, it does work. And you just have to give yourself. And the problem is, again, as we'd spoken about it before, as an independent creator, we have the luxury of being able to take our time. So I was able to take my time with this book. I wasn't in any rush to get it out there. And Kev was working hard on doing Spawn stuff, and still is. And he's the artist on this book, and he has inked some of his best work on these pages. We can't show it to anyone yet, but it's a special one. Like, his work is, and Jill has edited her heart out and given some amazing input on this book as well. So as a creative team, the three of us are pretty lucky to have each other, but we work so well together. We're so happy with anything that we've ever worked on together. We're very happy with it. So it's good to have that as well as a writer. If you have, like you have Jim, if you have a creative person you could bounce ideas off, like I don't know how you guys work directly with each other. You mentioned that you're giving 6 pages at a time, but I
give him a finished script, and I always said to him, have a read, see what you think, because he has the chance to say yes or no. I gave him the opportunity of a science fiction one or the horror, the werewolf one, and he went, I'll take the werewolf one.
Sure.
But when he's sending me roughs, I get 6 pages at a time to look at, and we okay those, and then we go into the ink and stuff like that, and now we're in color, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But we go backwards and forwards. Jim adds things in all the time.
Well, that's it. Like, that's like with Kev, it's the same. Yeah.
If it doesn't, we'd have to go back.
Yeah.
Because everything, even stuff I do, sometimes has to come out because yourself, when you see the finished article, it didn't work the way you expected it to work.
Sure. I know, like, we have a back and forth like that as well. Like, I mean, I'll send the script on, and Kev will read it, and he'll be like, "Yeah, great." And then he'll start to do roughs, and he might change 1 or 2 things, place panels in different places, place characters in different places, and bounce it off me. And I'm as a writer, you have to be open to that. If you're working as a creative group with another artist, with an editor, with a letterer, and a colorist. Now, thankfully, like, I'm the writer and colorist all in one. Kev is the artist and the letterer, and then we have Jill telling us what is spelled correctly and what sounds best, as dialogue is concerned. it kind of helps when you bounce off each other in that regard, because you can make the changes that are needed to pace the story better, lay out and tell the story better in the pages. And like, I'm looking at the pages now that Kev has sent on, and there's no lettering on them, but I can follow the story perfectly. Now I know I wrote it,
Yeah.
but I'm looking at it. I don't need the text. The way he's drawn those pages is perfect, and I know exactly where he's going to put the speech bubbles. I know exactly where he's going to put the dialogue, and I'm like, yep, perfect, great, phenomenal. But we went back and forth on this book because we all know, all three of us involved in this book know that it's a big deal, and know that it's going to be the kind of the yardstick that we measure ourselves against going forward. Like, so, like, Nosferatu was our kind of little launch pad for some ideas, and then this is kind of this us sowing the seeds of those ideas. So we'll see. Hopefully by this time next year we'll have a tangible piece of work.
You say it's a big book. How big?
140 pages.
That's big. Yeah. And
That's
it's one off.
That's book one of two.
Okay.
So it's going to be 280 pages in total, roughly.
Wow.
So it's a big undertaking, and it's probably going to take us about 2-3 years to get it out there. But we're very happy with what we're doing, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, I'm really excited. I just want it.
That's
You
whenever about it, you get excited. You want to know.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, like, it's called A Town Called Kill. It is a Western horror.
I remember a couple of years back, I had written a Western horror, and I think I sent you a message on Facebook. You're doing Western horror? We can't both do Western horrors. And quite rightly, you said there's plenty of room for two. You know, now we tried a couple of times with ours, and it didn't work until Jim came along, and we finally got one done over COVID, the first book in the series, and I love it. You know,
it's great.
It's a great genre, or subgenre, I suppose, isn't it? Or genre.
Vampire Western. It's this. You know, this was a labor of love for me, and I can tell you, when you mash up things and they work, it's so cool. And I can imagine Kevin's work on this is going to be just fabulous. I was telling Jim that when I went to Nosferatu launch, I looked at open page and I said, "That's definitely Kevin." And Kevin said, "That's the last time you'll see my work like that. It's all different now."
Yeah.
And it must be a complete sea change. It must be rewiring his head and his reflexes to change like that, you know, because
Kevin is a great artist because he's always improving himself. He doesn't sit still for too long. He always wants to better his abilities, and he's always working to better his abilities. He's a professional. It's what he does. This is his job, and this is what he loves to do. He loves to draw, and it's evident in everything he puts together. I'm very lucky to have him as an artist, a friend, everything. Like, he's brilliant. We have found a nice little kind of collective, as I've said multiple times. So we are very lucky to have each other doing this. I couldn't see myself making comics with anyone else. Like obviously, you know, I mean, I will make comics with other people, yes, but this is, you know, you see those teams of people that just work.
Yeah.
And I think I'm very lucky that early on I found Kevin and Jill, because we just work. Like we work together as a team very, very well. And like we run Rogue together, so like it's evident that we love doing it.
When it doesn't work, it's torture.
Sure, no, it is. Like, I mean, there's always going to be times.
Me and Jim, we work very well together.
Sure.
Bounce off each other, like you said, and it's all about the book, get the story right, get everything right. But I have had experiences, you know.
But look, I'll be honest with you, Ray. The best thing to do is forget about those experiences.
Exactly, but I do learn. You know, move on, learn, move on. As I said to Jim, you know, every time I do something wrong, it's expensive. You know, and we're not doing that anymore.
Sure. That's my philosophy. It can be. It depends, like, on the situation. It's very situational. But look, the best thing to do is, if you like, the two of you together now doing what you love, stick with it and keep going.
Yeah. What we find is, if you laugh at something, eventually you do get the point where you can laugh, look back and laugh. It's healthy, you know.
Sure.
And what we do, we have so much fun. This one here is City of Clowns. We had so much fun doing that, and I say it all the time because it was just hilarious to do. And at the table now, when people say, "What's that about?" I tell them, and I get so excited and I laugh.
Yeah.
They buy the bloody thing,
Yeah,
See,
yeah,
what's this about? That was the best 6 months we've had. It was to just put everything else in the shade, and we just moved on. We did other things,
yeah.
and that's the way we're going. Moving forward, that's how it's going to be. We have a laugh. We're serious about the work. We have a laugh, and we keep going.
Sure, yeah, it's the best way to be. And it's like,
Keep
and
going. I wanted to ask both
yeah.
of you. Oh, sorry, I just want to ask both of you as writers, because every time I finish a book and I see the first couple of pages, I go, God damn it, just let me go back. I just want to go back and start again. Every book I want. But do you do that? Because I know Ray, he would keep changing text till it goes to the presses if he could. Somebody has to take it off him and say, no, it's going to the presses. But do
Yeah.
you guys do you book you in? Do you would you see the book then? Do you have the same feelings? Like, I just want to go back and start drawing this again. God damn it, why didn't I do that before? And I can see a change in myself. Does it happen for you in that way?
As a writer, no. I plan out. I'm very methodical with how I plan my stories. I always have. I don't start a book unless I have a start, middle, and end. I don't start writing until I know those points, and then I fill in parts of it as I go. But I take everything very. It's probably one of the few things I do unbelievably methodically. I can be messy with other things when it comes to things, but my writing, I know where my punctuations are in regards to. Now, Jill would probably say my punctuation marks wouldn't be great, but my punctuation of story beats. I pride myself on knowing how to hit a story beat. And it just feels, when it feels right, it feels right. I will, if I'm writing it and it doesn't feel right, I'll go back while I'm writing it and there and then look at it and take a step back. But when I've got it done, it's generally done to the way that I want it. I've never gone back on something that I've written and said, you know what, that thing at the end, I need to go back and change something at the start, because I wouldn't have gotten to that point in the end unless I had that start. And the beautiful thing about having such a good editor in Jill is that Jill will tell you when the pacing is off, or if pacing is off at any point. And thankfully, I don't think I've had that problem yet. Now, granted, I've technically only done 2 finalized books, but even with A Town Called Kill, I specifically wanted a certain type of pacing and to hit certain story beats on certain pages. I planned that out very, very, like I said, methodically, where I know where my splashes are going to be. I know where my 2-page splashes, single-page splashes. I know where the beat is going to hit with something is going to drop that's like lore heavy in the story, or a surprise or a twist is going to end up. It has to come on a certain page. I have that all planned out ahead before I even sit down and write one word of dialogue. So I don't think I've ever gone back and changed that. Now, that might change down the future, but I think it's down to when I started writing books. And Ray, I think I've told you about these before. There are 2 books that I kind of used as a little Bible when I first started. And it's basically Writing Comics, Volume 1 and 2. And there are these 2 books. You can buy them on Amazon, or if you can find them in a store. They're very hard to find in a shop, but you can buy them on online stores. And it's collections of how to write comics from the big names in comics. And some people from film as well, like Kevin Smith. But you have Grant Morrison. You've got Warren Ellis. Now, Warren Ellis can go take a jump now, but he used to be somebody I used to admire a lot, not so much anymore. You have, other writers in there, artists that look at pages, Neil Gaiman, like they're all in there. And like, these are big names in comics. Brian Azzarello, I think Mark Waid was in there as well at some point. There's a plethora of different writers across 2 volumes of books that you see their styles, and they give you sample scripts and parts of their writing styles. But that to me was how I learned how to pace stories, particularly Grant Morrison's work. Looking at the way Grant Morrison writes, I was looking, wow, I kind of identified with that very quickly, and kind of just took his way of laying out books, and that's how I lay out my books. And anyone, like, we get that a lot at Rogue, and it's what we pride ourselves on, is that we would happily guide anyone. Like Ray came to us early doors before you even published books. I remember having conversations with Ray about how to put a script together, and we have that now with people coming to us that are saying, how do I write a comic? It's like, well, first thing you do is you go and you find sample scripts online, and you find a writer that you admire. So if you are a big Grant Morrison fan, go find Grant Morrison scripts and have a look at them. if you're a big Brian Azzarello fan, if you're a big Scott Snyder fan, there's sample scripts from all of those writers on the internet. And they will, if you like their writing styles, you can adapt that to yourself.
Yeah.
Or you could amalgamate them and put them all together and mix them up and then find your own style from that. So I think for me,
in the beginning, I went off and got Greg Pak, and he had 3 different types of script, depending on the kind of story he was writing.
Yeah.
And I followed that. That's kind of what I do now. But Jim will tell you, I plot and place everything before I even give it to him.
Yeah.
But when we have all the pages together and everything's done, the art's done, we're putting the text on, we go through it, and there might be some little point that you sort of have to explain. I'll change that before it goes off. There's no way I'd go back and change the run of the story or make major changes before it goes off.
Sure.
But the changes we would make would be on that page, something what didn't come through with the art for some reason, because there could be, Jim may have drawn something that's wow on the top of the page, and when the person reads it, they go, oh, look at that, and then they sort of skim over the rest of the page. That's something we all do as humans. We see the lovely thing, and then we slide on to the next thing. Sometimes you have to halt the reader, stick a bubble in there and say, no, don't move on yet. Wait, look at this panel as well. I'll do that a couple of times. Again, it's, as you say, it's pacing, and I get all that from Greg Pak. But pick a favorite writer, have a look online. They've all put scripts out there, and there's no right and wrong way to write a script. But Jim will tell you, I used to give him like encyclopedias as a script, and my first script were like short stories. They weren't really scripts, but now he gets the script and it's pared down. He has less to worry about. We know each other's style. He knows what I want. I know what to give him. So it works. But I would say to anyone starting off, do a course. If you can afford to pay for one, do it. There's plenty online, or go on YouTube. Watch a lot of stuff on YouTube. It's not always right, Have a look at Matt Garvey. He'll give you lots of tips and things. He won't tell you everything.
Matt Garvey is great. He has some great videos up on his YouTube channel.
Totally.
Yeah.
And listen to people. I find people come to our table and they ask you a question: how do I get started in comics? Happens all the time. How do we do this? How do that? Yeah. When you start telling them the reality, they're going, no, I don't want to hear this. Let me just do something. I want to get started. I want to do Superman now. You have to start off small, like you say, look for scripts, do a 4-page story, show it to people,
It's what 2008, like the 2008 tester is a future shock.
Yes, yeah.
So a 4-page story, it can't be about time travel, it can't be about Hitler, and it can't be about
reality.
Yeah, and I always remember Michael Carroll's brilliant story of how his very first future shock was about a time traveling Hitler.
Back to the Führer.
Where he ended up.
It's very good, believe it or not.
It's brilliant. It's phenomenal. It's a brilliant story, basically.
He said himself, he didn't come up with the title. Someone else gave him the title afterwards.
Yeah. So the whole plot of it is basically, instead of actually killing themselves in World War II, Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun go back in time to the birth of man, and they are the birth of civilization. So it's Adolf and Eva, so Adam and Eve. And but it was a time traveling Hitler, and that's what it is. But it's a 4-page story in a future shock. But if you go to write for 2008, that's what they give you, with like, write as a future shock, and you write it, and it'll go in a drawer somewhere in their headquarters. And then if they're looking for a new writer, they go into their future shock drawer and they pull it out and go, what have we got? And they look through them, and that's how they find a writer. But you have to be able to deliver a short, sharp story, which is like, it's tough. It's harder than you think. It's harder to be able to resolve a story, start a story, engage somebody. Like, you want to be engaging people by the end of the first page into the second page, and then resolving your story towards the middle of the third to the fourth page. And it's difficult to write that. It's very hard. And I've seen good writers struggle at that type of stuff. But I think a good understanding on how comic book scripts are laid out is 100% needed if you want to write comics. They're not like writing a short story. As Ray said, you don't write short stories, you don't write a novel, you don't write a movie script. It might sound like you need to write a movie script and give descriptions. No, it's similar, but not the same. Sometimes you get a movie script and there's no way it could be a comic book because of the way it's descriptive. So you have to understand that a comic book script has its own way of being written. And I think there's a multitude of resources out there. that you could now get. And there's plenty of people that are willing to help. Like I said, Rogue was founded on the basis of we wanted to give people a platform to tell their stories. And we do have a standard. So we have a standard that we want people to be at before we will publish their books and allow the book to be published on Rogue. But we will guide people happily. Like we get countless emails in on a daily basis from people saying, here's a script, here's my portfolio. Here's a short story I want to do. So we get that, like our inbox is flooded with that on a daily basis. And we have to say to people, look, you're almost there. Look at this video. We send them clips. We'll send them references. We'll say, look, maybe go back and rewrite this, do this, do this, do this. There are some fantastic, like it's great to meet people at shows as well. That's how we got like at Small Press Day many moons ago. It's where I first met Colin Griffin at Comic-Con about, I think it was 2018. Danny Earls rocked up to our table with his portfolio. And it was like, we could see that there were like, Danny was just there at that point, but now he started here. He's off the charts. Like, so like it's constant. If you want to get to it, you have to put the work in. It's tough. It'll take a lot of your time, but like as you said, it's a passion. You have to do it, and you have to be passionate about it. Because if you aren't, I've seen people come and go in a wet weekend where they have one good book, they bring out the book, and they're like, "Why aren't the big labels interested in me now?" It's like, it doesn't work that way, kid. You know, it doesn't work that way at all. You have to put in years of graft, and if your work is good enough and you submit it enough times and you put it out there hard enough, people will pay attention. But if you aren't doing that, if you're not pimping yourself hard and you're not working hard, nobody's going to give a damn, because nobody cares. Yeah. That's what you have to remember. Nobody cares. Nobody cares how great your book is. Yeah. They don't care how fantastic the story is. They want to see if it's something that can be marketed and sold.
It's a business.
Yeah. No. At the bottom, it's as a creative, it's brilliant to think I'm working in comics and I am making comics, and it's brilliant and people love my work. That's fantastic. But at the end of the day, the people that make the decision to put you in charge of their book for a period of time, to them it's a business, and they want to know if your artwork will sell or your writing will sell.
Well, over COVID, we were producing books and we were waiting to sell them at convention, and I sent off City of Clowns to American publishers, and one of them didn't come back to me. A couple of them did, and one guy said he was lovely now, and he runs the place, he owns it, and he said, "I love this." I said, "Oh, great! I'm hearing good things." He goes, "No, I love it, but I don't know who it's for. How would they market this? Who's going to buy that?" And I went, "I don't know. You know, it's a quirky idea," and he loved the idea, and he thought the art was great. The cover just blew him away. But he said, I can't market this. You know, I can't sell this to anybody. Have a look on our website. Stuff we do sell. It's not like that." And I said, "Well, you do something about clowns." He said, "Yeah, but that's like Killer Clowns from Outer Space kind of thing, you know."
Sure.
He said, it's pure horror, you know. This one, it's great. I can't market it. How do I sell it?
Well, that's why we always say that you have to have that little pop culture hook to it. Like, so that's why you say Nosferatu is Lost Boys meets Band of Brothers, because you can market that. You know, Ocean City is like Spider-Man meets Nova, or Spider-Man meets Stranger Things, or something along those lines. You have to give them something that they recognize in order to be able to link it in with what you're trying to sell them.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, we have elevator pitches for everything we do. You know, it's the X-Files in Dublin or whatever. You know, we have something. We have the Wild Bunch meets, you know, Salem's Lot. That's one of our books.
Yeah.
This one, all I have to say is, I hold it up, I hand it to someone and say, what if the police were actually clowns? That there were no police. During the Renaissance period, clowns didn't fall out of favor. They became the police. And people go, "Oh yeah, it's not too far from reality." And the bloody thing just sold. It's sold a ton of these, you know.
Yeah.
But I can see what the man was saying. You put that in a catalogue, it won't sell.
Yeah.
You know, and it's that person sort of explaining the idea helps, because it is only an idea. It's not a mishmash of two things. You know, Jaws meets Terminator. You know, it's I've taken the police out, I put clowns in. Yeah. You know. But I have to say, the people now, like, the feedback I got from this thing, and it's not perfect, but the feedback I get from it, it's so uplifting. You know, it keeps us going when things aren't going so good sometimes.
Sure.
You know, and you're looking at a deadline and you think, "Oh crap, you know what to do here." City of Clowns, the feedback we get is, That's great. You know, that's very funny. You know, and every page you turn, it's something I didn't think was coming. But I get his point. It's not a marketable thing in the American market. You know, it's sort of a niche thing. You know, and it was nice to hear from him though. You know, sorry, go on.
We phone him tomorrow and ask him if he fancies publishing a Jaws stroke
Yes,
Terminator.
yeah. I
Because I want to read that.
haven't been mine for Wolf when I finished it.
Oh, really? Right. Okay. All right.
Wolf is a complete departure. It's an adults only book. We've never done one before,
Sure.
and it won't be for kids. You know, and definitely won't be. And it's it's close. It's normally I do 10 drafts before I get to finish one and give it to Jim. This time I did only 4, and it's kind of close to what I had in mind, how my mind works. And you know me, I put myself on the page, so this is close to how my mind works. So it'll be interesting to see how people think of it when it comes out. You know. Anyway, I did have a question. We grow up, we age, our life changes, and it affects how we think and how we approach the world. Did becoming a father change how you write your stories?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
100%. It changes your brain.
yeah.
It changes your brain. So therefore, anything you do after you become a father changes everything else. So, like, I mean, my writing changed drastically. I'm a huge horror nut. Always have been. Grew up with it. Just it's ingrained in me. I love horror, and I write horror in everything. I put a bit of horror in everything I do. And when I went back to try and restart A Town Called Killer, start finishing off parts of it, I found that I was approaching it differently. There's particular plot points in the book that, as a parent, were difficult to face as the creator. And I kind of, you know when you watch a Steven Spielberg film and you see it in every Steven Spielberg film bar one, if there's a kid in the scene, nothing bad is going to happen to that kid.
Yeah.
Nothing bad, apart from one movie. We all know what
Sure,
that film
robot,
is.
you know.
Yeah. So, like, the thing about it is that the Steven Spielberg part of my brain kind of kicked in a bit, because I was like, I'm a dad now. If I have anything that might be seen as over the top, gore, violent, twisted, can I write it to the level that I want to write it at, that doesn't come across as just wishy-washy? Because I always want the impact of something that's done by an evil character to be evil.
Yes.
I'm a great detester of the overuse of an anti-hero. I don't like anti-heroes. I think the world has become too used to the bad guy eventually becoming a good guy.
Yeah.
I love the idea of a bad guy being a bad guy and having his reason for being a bad guy. And the bad guy, yes, is in his own idea, he's the hero in every story he's in. But I like my bad guys to be bad. And it's cliched in a way. It's not that I want, all the heroes to wear white hats and all the bad guys to wear black hats. That's not the way it goes. I know there's gray in the world. But when somebody does something unceremoniously evil, well, they're evil.
Yeah.
And to write that,
do you kill the cat?
Yeah.
The bad guy kills the cat, starts the movie, he's the bad guy.
Sure.
Your fans a bus. Whatever he does after that makes no difference. He'll always be the bad guy.
The quintessential entrance. Sorry, the quintessential. Yeah.
Nosferatu. I wasn't expecting such a hopeful ending. It seemed more optimistic than I expected from Wayne Talbot. And I thought, maybe because he's become a dad now, he sees something different.
Well, no, Nosferatu. I wrote Nosferatu before Amelia was born.
Oh.
It published after she published after she was born, but I had finished writing it before she was born.
Oh, right, okay.
I'm trying to think now, was it? Yeah, it was. I think at the end, like, I had already had that story plotted out and finished in my head, and then I was putting it on paper. She was born, and then that book was in production, and then it was published then, I think, a year later or something. But I know, I think I'd written it, the whole thing. Like, Nosferatu was a very fast write for me. It was one of the fastest things I've ever written, because it just came to me real quickly. It was, I don't know what it was, but I was working my day job. I was traveling up and down a lot to Belfast, and I was on the train up and down. And I love writing on trains, and I get a lot of inspiration from being on a train and write. I write. Nasrada was written on the Enterprise up and down to Belfast for a year, for less than about 8 months, up and down to Belfast, and I wrote that entire book on that train while listening to the Bram Stoker's Dracula soundtrack. And that was it. That was entirely how that book was written, with a few polishes up here and there when I was at home, but mostly there. And I think I had that a whole ending was planned out because, I think it had to be. I think it's a World War II story, and I think World War II stories for me, while they may seem dour and horrible and filled with terror at certain aspects throughout the story, I think 99% of them always have that happy ending.
Well, the war has to end.
Yeah. So for that particular ending, there was hope.
Yeah.
And a look to the future.
Because the broker was always, to me, it was, there's going to be a bigger, badder guy, no matter what we do. There'll be another, American president. There'll be another American president, no matter what happens.
Sure.
It felt like it was, there's no hope for this. We're screwed on what we do. I'm making fun of it, but that's just...
No, you're right. You're right. Like, the broker for me was, I think it was the frame of mind I was in when I wrote that, because it was very much about the world we were in, and still are, I think. But there is a sequel to the broker. I've rewritten it about 6 times because stuff I've put in there has happened in real life.
Yeah,
and because the world is so fucking weird. So it's a case of stuff I thought was like, I know that won't happen.
Yeah.
And it happened in some degree, or some shades of truth were in there. So I remember talking to Brian Corcoran about this at the launch for Nosferatu, and I was on the second revision of the broker at the time. And I was like, I have it, it's there. But the problem is something I wrote in it just happened literally 2 days ago. So I'm going to have to rewrite it, because people are just going to think I'm ripping off the real world, because there was always an element of the broker. Yes, it does have shades of the real world in there, but it was just pushed beyond that boundary of belief, and just slightly on the edge of it. Yeah. But no, the broker 2 has been written numerous times and will eventually be published, I think, down the line. But once I get past the town called Kill, I'll go back to the world of the broker.
So all of our books have a message, a moral message. They're all like parables, little stories, Do you think it's the responsibility of the creator? We create a story, we mold that world, to give people that message, to say that there is hope.
No. It's not It's not, if you feel that it's your responsibility to tell messages in every single story you write, that's great. But the way I write my stories, I write stories that I want to read. I write stories that I would like to see written or put out there in the world. Yes, there might be morals in there. They just happen to be because in the world that we live in, like you said, there was hope at the end of Nosferatu. I didn't write that in there just to give a message. But I think there are people out there, yes, if you feel that you want to put a message in there about society, the broker obviously carried some of that too. If there are parables in my stories, they're purely by coincidence. Through osmosis of stuff that I've consumed because I am a very hopeful person. I'm a very optimistic person. I'm not cynical in any way. I try to be anyway. But it's like, have you heard of the Japanese manga writer and artist Junto Ito?
Yes. Yeah.
He does all the Spiral books and all those different things, right? He's a phenomenal horror writer and artist.
Yeah.
It's some fucked up shit.
Right?
Really fucked up shit. But in real life, he is the most nicest, kitten-loving, just flouncy dude you will ever meet. He's just really happy with life and loves the world. Yeah. But his books are some of the most twisted shit out there. Like really weird shit. And I aspire to be like that. I wish I could put books out like that where people are just like, what? And then they meet you in real life and you're like, hi. But no, I don't think it's the responsibility of any writer to be putting messages in their books. If they feel they need to, go ahead, go nuts, fill your boots. But to me, I want to write stories that I want to read. That's pretty much it. So I love to read stories about World War II Nazi vampires, or society falling down around our ears and people rising up against it because fuck the system, or a Western where weird shit happens and it's horrible, you know, or, you know, other, I mean, I've written other short stories and they've never been published, but I mean, I've got stuff that's out there that is just wacky stuff, because the stuff that I consumed at a young age was weird shit, and it kind of warped my mind slightly. 2000 AD was fucking strange. Like, you know, it was a weird book.
I've never read it.
Oh, Ray, it's like there's a lot of people that don't like it, right? And
I don't like it. It passed me by. It's like Sandman. Sure. Sandman passed me by. I wasn't into comics at the time.
See, the thing about Sandman is Sandman is timeless. So you can go and you can get Sandman now and read it and find the joy in it. And
I have tried.
Yeah.
I don't think it's for me. I love some of the characters in it, and I really love Constantine. I love Hellblazer. I love it. And I like the TV show. But I think Sandman itself appeals to certain people from a certain time, you know. As I say, it just passed me by.
Sure. And comics are like that. Like, I mean, they're not going to like.
I wasn't into comics for donkey's years. Sorry.
Yeah.
I gave up when I was like 14, 15, and I was 35, 36 before a lad I worked with brought in a Wolverine comic. And I said, "What's the Wolverine?" And he went, "What? Don't know Wolverine?" And I was hooked, you know.
Yeah.
But I was low key. It wasn't until we went to your live PugsCast that I heard people saying it was in the Grand Central.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Yeah. And I saw these people up with microphones saying, I work in such and such a thing, and I read comics, and I grew up in a time when it wasn't a great thing to read comics. And then and suddenly the whole place started singing this X-Men tune, and I'm going, daughter, what's going on? And Haley says, that's theme tune, Dad. X-Men. I went, oh yeah. And I went along with it, and that rekindled, you know, it was okay to talk about comics then, you know. And I went to a few more things then, and then I went to a con, and I went, I could do this. And I approached yourself one day and said, I've got an idea for a book, and you went, write it, Ray, it's dead easy, go on. Not quite like that, but that was the start of it. But getting back into comics, but I've missed 20, 30 years of comics, you know. And there's great comics out there, but people come to me and say, have you read such a thing? No. Oh, you have to, it'll change your life. Sometimes it does. But I'm so old now that I go, do I want to read 900,000 pages, you know? The guy, Shonen manga? Something like this. Yeah. He says, you have to read this.
Shonen Jump.
And I looked it up. That could be. I looked it up, and it's like 900 volumes or something like this.
Well, manga is a different animal, you see. So manga, it might be easier to consume the anime of the manga. But manga is a different animal altogether. There are ones that are more concise and more collected.
I'm just messing them. It's the idea that there's so much out there. I'm 61 this year. I can't start something that I'm going to get obsessed with now. I don't have time, you know. I really don't have time. This takes up an awful lot of time.
It does. I mean, one thing you will, if anyone ever wants to go into the world of comics, you're right. Don't get into the world of comics to make money. And also, if you like sleep, don't get into the world of comics.
That's right, yeah.
I haven't. I mean, people. I get asked that a lot. It was like, how do you do things? Like so many things that you do. Yeah. I don't sleep. I don't sleep at all. Like when I'm producing a book, I probably get, if I'm lucky, I get 4 hours a night. Because I got a day job. I actually have a day job to pay for all this stuff. Like, you know, I'm not a professional comic book artist. I'm not a professional comic book writer. I'm not, you know, world renowned. I don't make a ton of money from what I do. I do it because I love it, and that's it. And I get an enjoyment out of it. And I'm very lucky to have a very supportive partner who thinks that, you know, who sees how much joy it brings me and understands my passion for it, you know. And if you have that, you're lucky. So, I mean, there are people that are young and getting into it, and they don't understand the road that's ahead of them. So you do have to try to kind of, anyone that comes to them, it's not that you have to smash that down. You have to say, look, if this is what you want to do, it's going to be hard work. And then, you know, and some people do it and do it for years, and then they just do one thing and it lands and they get picked up. So yeah, like, I mean, we were very lucky. I think we're lucky to find the people. I was lucky to find the people that I work with on that regard. You need to find people that are on the same wavelength as you. You and Jim work together well. You do need to
I wouldn't
find
go that far, I'd be lost without him, and I've said it many times. I don't mind saying it.
Yeah.
I've been so depressed last few years, and Jim cheers me up. He sends me a page, and it's wonderful, and we have a chat, and it's all different, And I need to. I never made any friends growing up, and one of the reasons I went to that pubcast that night was my wife said, "Go make friends."
Sure.
Like comics, make friends doing comics. It's so difficult, really is. It's just an uphill climb, and it's
the thing about this is like the world that we're all in at the moment. Like, conventions are coming back, and they are huge social spots for people that are into what we're into, and you'll never meet somebody more passionate about what they love than a nerd. And on the flip side of that coin, you will never meet people that are more socially awkward. And it's like, and I mean, and I'm one of them. I'll put my hand up and say that there's a shield of confidence that I hide behind to a degree. Because I've stood up on stages and had conversations and done interviews and hosted panels and done all that type of stuff. But at the same time, I sit behind a desk and sometimes you vanish into yourself. It's there. Everyone has it. And nobody can turn it on 24/7 and be that fucking happy. If they are, they're insane. It's ebbs and flows. So I think after being like, we're going to Talk Bubble in November, I'm very much looking forward to it. But in one regard, I'm very much looking forward to it. But Talk Bubble is one of the most social, welcoming shows out there. And I'm still not used to being back in large crowds. The last two Comic Cons that we did here in Dublin, it was like a sea of people coming at you, and it was a lot. So I think the world is slowly but surely, hopefully, getting back to a level of normality that we can all deal with. But I think a lot of people, after being shut away in their homes for 2.5 years, it's having to readjust, and it's difficult, and it's particularly for creatives. Like, I think, like I said previously, you had to consume and live your life to be able to create. And while artists, like, when I'm creating, I shut myself away from a lot of things, and I'm like focused on doing what I'm doing. But you have to go consume those things in order to be able to focus on everything. And if you have certain people in your life that you rely on to be there to kind of bolster you up and help you be creative, the last couple of years were tough for those type of people that didn't have that outreach. So yeah, no, it can be hard. And hopefully anyone that hadn't found it difficult is slowly but surely coming back into themselves and will be able to fill that creative hole that was missing for the last while and pick themselves up with the people around them.
It was great getting back to the convention in one way, because we've met people we haven't seen in 3 years.
Yeah.
And they've changed, they've grown up, literally, in some cases. And they've seen what we do now. And what we do now is slightly different to what we started off with, obviously. And bringing them along then, and seeing them get so excited, what's coming next, have a chat about it. Mm-hmm. But once that person walks away, I go, right, the ventriloquist dummy with no ventriloquist, it's just gone. Mm. I have no social skills, I have no charisma. If I'm not talking about the comic on a plank, there's nothing happening to draw people over, that kind of way.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for me, but I persevere. I go to these things, like people who know me a long time, they go, you do what? You go to conventions and you stand there and you talk to 100 people or 200 people, whatever. Well, yeah, I have to. And it's that I have to thing that makes me go. It's not always successful now, I mean, I would nearly pay some people to go away sometimes, because lady there a thing, and she was lovely, but she picked up every book and asked me a million questions and then didn't buy anything. 20 minutes.
That comes to the territory, Ray. That happens to everyone. It comes to the territory. You're gonna have.
People said to her, "Take for free, go away, just read it."
You have to ready yourself for that type of thing, because not everyone, people are there to browse and they're not there to buy everything. And you're not going to make a sale every single time. You're not going to garner.
We reckon.
readers every time. So
because you're there not doing much most of the day, I spend my time counting things. And we've noticed that it's just over 50% of the people who stop and talk buy something. And we think that's a pretty good number, because when we started off, it was nowhere near that. We had one comic and they were just walking by in trainloads, and they're going, okay. Now we have a lot to talk about, and it's about 50%. If I get them to stop and have a chat, about 50% will buy something. And that's just fantastic, because quite a lot of people come back and buy something else. Even that day they'll come back. And it's great. I always say to people, there's the first part of our witch. Go away, have a cup of coffee, read it, come back. And a lot of people come back.
That's good.
It's getting them to the hooked, getting to talk, getting to open a thing, see the artwork. Oh, this is interesting. It is. It's cons are a thing in themselves, and you need a con partner or someone there to show you the ropes. If you go without knowing what's going on, it's like being in the Amazon jungle, with no net, Now, what do I want to ask you? I know I wrote it down just to see, because I couldn't believe I was going to ask you, what's the absolute best thing about making comics? Absolute best thing.
Well, I mean, I think I might have already answered it, but it's kind of been able to tell the stories you want to read for me. So it's like I write the stories, I create the stories I want to see on the shelves, and if it's something that I'm passionate about and the story I want to read, I'll create it. If I get ideas that I know that I don't think have been done a certain way, I'll put that as in a book. So yeah, I mean, telling the stories I want to read is the main thing, and having the ability to be able to tell them any way I want, because comic books are a limitless medium. Like, you have the sky is the limit, the imagination of the writer and the artist, that's the limit, So,
and of all the things, the parts of making a comic, what's your favorite part? Is the writing? Is it?
It's kind of strange. I love writing it. I love seeing what my favorite thing is. I love seeing the pages for the first time from the writing. So when I send the script off, the artist sends back the pages based on what I've written, and it's like, there it is. You've seen, like, it's like you have the worry is like, is the artist going to get this at all? And I'm, like I said, I've been very lucky with Kev and with Brian and with Rory in the past, that they took the scripts and they were like, yeah, this is great, and literally just took the words and turned it into beautiful artwork. And I've been very lucky with the artists that I've worked with. I've done work with people. I've actually done work with artists that hasn't seen the light of day because of NDAs and other things, but it was people that I've always wanted to do something with, and I managed to get to do that, and that scratched that itch. But even seeing those people send back stuff that I think, I might not be at a level for these artists, and it's like, no, here you go, and it's great. So seeing those pages come back after giving them the script, and the roughs coming back and all that type of stuff, even the roughs, actually seeing the roughs and going, yes, the artist gets what I'm trying to do. That's probably my favorite part of the story.
What's that process.
Like? What's it like?
I tell you, now, a quick one. I'll probably edit this out. I had an artist, and fantastic artist. I look at this. I had the stuff as a background on my computer, and it's just fabulous. Oh, it's incredible. Couldn't work with them. If I said black, he said white. If I said up, he said down.
That happens, man, and it's unfortunate when it goes.
Yeah,
but it's so it depends. You see, it depends on the situation and the individual and how they interpret things and how they work with people.
Yeah.
And some people have a set mind, and they can be hard to work with if they're not willing to be malleable, and you're not willing to be malleable with them, and you don't conjoin. Sometimes that happens. It happens that you don't gel with people.
Yeah. This way, but when Jim came along, the first thing I said to him, "Are you sure you get it?" And he was going, "Oh, I get it. Yeah, I know what you want." And he did. It was amazing. And I'm going, this is the guy, But we did have a thing, we had one thing. We have a book called The Talking Gun.
Yeah.
Yes.
If the Talking Gun was a nickname the Native Americans gave to a Gatling gun, because it sounded like chattering, right?
Yeah.
And for some reason, Jim didn't want to draw a Gatling gun. He wanted to draw shotguns. And it was the funniest thing. It went on for a couple of weeks, and he was getting more and more. What's going on here, Ray? It's a Gatling gun. You have to draw a Gatling gun. And it was brilliant, though. But we had to leave it, finish the book, and then go back and fix the pages because it's a crucial moment in the story where the gun gets to talk, But you have to see the gun come along, be delivered, and put together and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and
there's something about
it was brilliant.
When has this ever happened? Because I think it's just I always think every time there's a problem, I think it's me. I just this, and it's an artistic mind. Your background, I think you and I have a similar background. You went to art school to study animation.
Yes, I went to Ballyfermot.
And animation was in the amount. I studied film and animation as part of my degree course, and that's a whole lifetime ago. So I went to art. You and I, we've had an art school experience, and I don't know what this is. I have a kind of, I think of it as the eye of the needle, where I'm looking through the eye of a needle. I don't know what's on that side, and I don't know what that's the future, that's the past, but I'm just looking through this eye of a needle. This is the only way I can say it. So if I'm reading a script, there's sometimes I don't know something will get into this eye of the needle. It'll get into my brain. So, for instance, the shot. I don't know where that shotgun came from. It was maybe in a different scene. Somebody had a shotgun or something like this. But I get it into my brain, and I'm just going. There's the next page. There's the next page. There's the next page, and it comes to this. And for some reason, I don't know what it is. And it got in this shotgun, got into my brain, and Ray's like, what is the matter with this dickhead? I can't. It's a Gatling gun. How many times do I have to tell him? And I don't know what it. And I suppose as artists, we have these. I don't know if it's a different hemisphere of the brain or it's a peculiar way our brains interpret things or something. But have you ever, I remember hearing a really famous incident of Stan Lee's where he lost his shit. He wrote it down. When Johnny Storm says "flame on," he shouts "flame on," and I think it was either the artist would sketch it on or the writer would, big speech, and he would write "torch on." And Stanley told this guy it's "flame on," and then eventually he just lost his shit and went down and just paper up in the air and finger wagging hair jar. It's "flame on," I don't know what it is. Have you ever experienced that, Wayne? Either from your own artistic thing, you get something stuck in your brain, or you've written something explicitly, and the artist is like, "What's going on here? What's this?" So it is just me. It's just
I'm trying. I don't think so. Actually, I think I've had conversations back and forth with Kev on panel placement. There was one particular page or sequence in Nosferatu that we were going back and forth on. Just literally, it was like a 2-paragraph conversation, so it wasn't a heated conversation or anything. But there's a moment in Nosferatu where Brennan and Dawes are walking through a forest, and Brennan is telling Dawes a ghost story, an old Irish folklore from back in his family thing from back in Boston, and there's a particular way that the panels had to be placed for this, in my mind, for the thing to flow and the story to work, because it goes to a splash page. And Kev read it, and he drew a rough out, and he says, "Oh," and I says, no, this is way it has to go." And Kev's like, "No, but what?" And it's like, "No, read the script again and look through the bubbles." And he did, and literally it was a 2-paragraph thing. He was like, "Oh, I see it now," and it took it. So I think when I focus in on certain things within the story as a writer, I write very visually, though. So if you were to read any of my scripts, there's visual descriptions of the scene and pretty precise, but I am open to interpretation. I am precise in how I write it, but I'm not saying this is how it has to be unless it's very specific. And with A Town Called Kill in particular, before we went into this, I said to Kev, there's going to be a lot of very specific pieces in these books, in this book and in these pages, that if there are going to be changes on the art, we're going to have to discuss it, because I want things to look a certain way. And Kev totally took that on board. So it's not that I don't kind of zoom in on one particular thing and it kind of overrules everything else. But if there are particular moments that have to be told a certain way within the storytelling, I'll be adamant about that. But like I said before, I've been very lucky to work with teams that we work very well and very flexible together on that type of stuff. So
Yeah, I've always said Ray's a joy as a collaborator. He's a joy. His patience of a saint. But the only thing I've said, and I think Ray's maybe hesitant or reluctant sometimes, but what I've always said is I've never been precious about changes. Like if I've done something and it's not right or correct, and you just say, "Listen, it's got to be changed," it's no more to me. Like I don't get frustrated at all, or to me, there's a kind of momentum. Like you've got a deadline, you've got to hit your deadline, and if you've got to go back and change a couple of things here or there, that's just part of it. I know some artists who are really, this is my vision and it shan't change, and this is my integrity and all of that stuff. As a commercial artist or an artist for hire, good luck. Good luck.
You're not going to get very far if you're like, I have a vision and I believe my stroke is perfect, and that you're not going to get very far with that. If you're that stringent and you can't take edits, then good luck to you, because that's editing is a huge part of.
And I had a character going killed off. I want to do a Game of Thrones thing. George R. R. Martin kill off a main character, and it was a Dungeons and Dragons series we did called Witch, and the cover and everything was to lead people to believe that there's three main characters: an elf princess, a barbarian, and a vampiress, and they were going to carry you through the story. But really, the vampiress was going to get killed off in the first episode. So that was what I'd written. I wasn't going to change. No, it has to be that way because I've got 10 other characters to come in accounting. And we got to the last couple of pages, and Jim draws her death scene, and he drew her so well and so sexy. I went, can't kill her off. So we kept her in, and she became the triumvirate, the third part. And I took 3 characters out to make room for her.
Right.
Fantastic. Oh, because this way this guy drew her. And if I'd been precious and said no, the book wouldn't have been as good, And people love her, she's terrific. And she took over and she works with her characters. I never meant to be that way. But this guy, he drew this thing and sent it to me, and it was obviously something he had under the mattress for years, takes it out once in a while, has a look at, puts it away again. And she's just amazing, Wayne. I gotta tell you, she's brilliant.
She's a couple of reasons why I like her in particular. A couple of just,
But
very blessed.
I wouldn't be precious. If he has a great idea or he puts a new character in, I go, go with it. It's only when it interferes with the story we both have to go, and we can't do that, But I put stuff in and seen his stuff, and then went, I'll take it out because his stuff is better. It's give and take. Like it's Right, Wayne, it has been a pleasure. It has absolutely been a pleasure, man. And it's great to see your face, even though you're this size. I gotta tell you, I wouldn't be in comics without you. I wouldn't have started this without your advice and your help at the start. And you're always a friendly face at a convention.
I appreciate that. That means a lot. Thanks.
You're an approachable person. I'm going to go to ask for advice, and not everyone's like that. They say they are, but they're not really. So, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. That's been terrific.
Like I say, since we started having interviewing people on, we've got more people contacting me and saying that it's a different kind of podcast, and there's the two of us talking about our comics.
Cool.
People learn something from it, kind of way.
Yeah.
Little nugget here and there. So we are all supportive in this place. And I come on and say, you've been great, man. Thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a wonderful time. The time flies, though, doesn't it?
It does. If anyone wants to find any of the stuff that we do at Rogue, you can find us at roguecomitsireland.com.
Well, we'll put it in the description.
In the description. Yeah. And like the pubcast as well, Irish pubcast and stuff like that, and then the Sorcery Shenanigans D&D stuff. It's all up on YouTube, so you can find it there too.
Okay, guys, listen. Have a good one. I'll talk to you again, okay? All the best.
Cheers, Wayne. See you, Ray.
See you now. Bye-bye.